The 7 space predictions from Arthur C. Clarke that came true. This is authored by Riz Verk via HackerNoon, and it's on Zero Hedge by Tyler Durden. About a year ago, I was visiting Sri Lanka and had the pleasure of visiting Arthur C. Clarke's well-preserved office. You can read about my visit there if you like. Anyone who's read that piece knows that I grew up as a big fan of Clarke's science fiction, so it was a thrill to be there and see his books and office. He lived in Sri Lanka for 30 years before his passing in 2008. This year, I'm unable to travel so far, but visiting my parents' house in the Midwest got me thinking about the times that I used to read Clarke's science fiction books while growing up, imagining I was off with some crew on a romp through the solar system. While there were some elements of Clarke's books that were way out of our league even today, think Star Child or Childhood's End. There were always others that seemed like they were not too far away. So this Christmas holiday, I wanted to write about a few things that Arthur C. Clarke predicted in his science fiction and science-related works that have mostly come true or will very soon. Science fiction turns into science. Of course, science fiction has always had a way of predicting the future, going all the way back to Jules Verne's 1865 novel From the Earth to the Moon. While he didn't have it exactly right, Verne's prediction that it would be the Americans who first got to the moon, firing off a giant gun, rockets didn't exist, from somewhere in Florida, were pretty spot on. And who doesn't know about the flip phone being a descendant of Star Trek, and today's FaceTime and iWatch look a lot like the Dick Tracy watch phone, don't they? The difference between Clarke's science fiction and much of these others was that he often put more thought into how these things could work and why they were the way they were, relying on them not just for convenience, but drawing on both scientific literature and scientific necessity. Unlike the transporter in Star Trek, for example, which was created just for convenience so that the producers wouldn't have to pay for special effects of shuttles going to planets and back, which were costly, Clarke usually had some well-thought-out reason for the science fiction elements in his novels. From ACC himself, Clarke himself once said that trying to predict the future is a discouraging, hazardous occupation, and some credit ACC, as he's known in the science fiction world, with having predicted everything from the internet to email to Google. In this article, I'm going to stick to what ACC did best, write about outer space and aliens. Now, I'm not claiming that Clarke was necessarily the first to think of all these things. In fact, sometimes he was just the first to put them into popular science fiction, even when a paper or a concept existed before. So without further ado, here are some predictions that have already, to different degrees, of course, come true. Number 1, the gravity assist maneuver. In the novelization of 2001 A Space Odyssey, which was written concurrently with the movie released in 1968, ACC had the Discovery go to one of Saturn's moons, Iapetus. That's the one that looks like it's a sewn together two halves of a globe with a rim at the equator. Remember, it looks like it's a constructed structure. That's Saturn's moon Iapetus. We'll do another video on that. That has to be, you've got to see that. Also, Saturn's rings, they say, are manufactured. They're not natural. Anyway, so ACC had the Discovery go to one of Saturn's moons, Iapetus, and not just Jupiter. In the movie, Stanley Kubrick, who was collaborating with ACC and wanted to use the latest images from NASA, decided to go with Jupiter as the destination because they had pictures from NASA about what Jupiter looked like. Kubrick was worried that since they didn't have as many images of Saturn, the film might look dated once NASA got more accurate images of Saturn. So just like in the novel of 2001, the Voyager probes used Jupiter's gravity to get to Saturn. This is all a bit of history, but I recall reading the novelized version, and it was the first time I had heard of the gravity assist, quote-unquote, maneuver. In the novel, the Discovery spaceship uses Jupiter's gravity to speed itself up on the way to Saturn. While Jupiter is only 500 million kilometers away, Saturn can be almost 1 billion kilometers further away, depending on the position even though we're used to them being closer. On average, the ringed planet, that's of course Saturn, is almost twice as far. This means that the ship didn't have to carry as much fuel to get all the way to Saturn. This idea of using planets to assist in slingshotting the spacecraft was actually used by NASA in many probes, including the Mariner 10 and the Voyager probes. In some cases, the probes went inward towards the Sun and used Venus for gravity assist to slow down, while the Voyagers used Jupiter to speed up on their way to Saturn, just like in ACC's novel. In another of his novels, Rendezvous with Rama, which we'll talk about in a minute, an alien spaceship built in an asteroid is using the Sun for a gravity assist on its interstellar mission. ACC was not the first to think about this. The Soviets actually used the gravity of the Moon for a flyby of a probe in 1959, but his use of it around a planet was the first time many science fiction readers like myself heard about it. Number 2, his idea of the communications satellite. ACC proposed using a satellite in geosynchronous orbit for bouncing off radar signals, and you can look into this in Wikipedia. Arthur C. Clarke, in an article for Wireless World in 1945, proposed the idea of a geostationary communications satellite, which was a satellite that stayed in the same position relative to the Earth, and such a satellite, ACC proposed, could be used to bounce radio signals off and send radio signals all over the Earth. The editor of Wireless World changed his paper title to Extraterrestrial Relays. According to many sources, the idea wasn't taken seriously at the time, as no one knew how to get a satellite into what became known as the Clarke orbit. 20 years later, though, in 1965, the first communication satellite was launched into the Clarke orbit, and today there are over 300 satellites on this orbit. Now, the third item is the asteroid that we have seen lately, the interstellar asteroid from outside the solar system, the Oumuamua. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that probably. It's a Hawaiian name. In 2017, a controversial object appeared in the night sky. It was observed for a matter of weeks. It was determined to be the first known object that came from outside of our solar system. Its strange maneuvers and properties made scientists think it was an elongated cigar-shaped type of asteroid or comet or even an alien space probe. We couldn't be sure which it was. The scenario that astronomers found themselves in seemed eerily similar to ACC's 1973 novel Rendezvous with Rama. In the novel, an elongated asteroid, and this again here is elongated, was adapted into a space probe by an alien civilization and wanders through our solar system, planning to use the Sun as a gravity assist maneuver to get wherever it was going. The probe was abandoned in the book and its sequels by the alien civilization. Astronomers first proposed calling the asteroid discovered last year, which sure looked like it could be an asteroid steered by an alien civilization, Rama. In the end, the name Oumuamua was chosen, a good name which means heavenly messenger or messenger from the past. And of course, scientists went ahead and stated confidently that there was nothing alien about the object. It's a year later, and what do we know? The object did in fact swing around the Sun, and its velocity increased in a way that was not consistent with asteroids or comet hypothesis, leading some, including Harvard astronomer Abram Loeb, professor of chair of astronomy, and Shmuel Bialy, a postdoctorate scholar at the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, to speculate that it was, in fact, an alien probe slingshotting around the Sun after all. Its acceleration properties were more consistent with the properties of a light sail than either an asteroid or a comet. So while we don't know what it was exactly, the best hypothesis we have that fits the data at present is that it was an alien probe going through our solar system, swinging around the Sun. Sounds familiar? Maybe we should have called it Rama after all. And now number 4, building ships in orbit. The discovery from the movie 2001, A Space Odyssey. ACC predicted that it would be much easier to build large spacefaring ships in orbit and to use shuttles to get astronauts up to the ships. This is exactly what's being done with the ISS. This is how the Discovery was built in 2001, A Space Odyssey, and its successor in the sequels as well. This wasn't an ACC invention. Many science fiction writers predicted this. Are we doing this today? Not exactly, but it's within reach. Well, we are doing it. We're doing it with the ISS. It was put together in pieces, and we shuttled the astronauts back and forth every couple of months. There are companies who have sent up third printers to assemble large structures in space. Made in Space is the company that has printed the largest 3D printed object ever in preparation for printing large structures in space. And there are near-term plans for inflatable modules which get assembled into large structures in space. Think Bigelow Aerospace. Thus far, the ISS is the only such structure that is fully deployed, but this prediction is not very far off. Number 5, HAL and conversational artificial intelligence. Who can forget the classic film, the classic line from 2001 Space Odyssey, which came from HAL 9000, the onboard artificial intelligence computer. Quote, "I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that," end quote. Yeah, the artificial intelligence computer turned out to be against the astronauts. So anyway, that's it. So I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. The HAL 9000 computer from 2001 Space Odyssey. There's been an artificial intelligence explosion in the last 10 years as machine algorithms are now being used to learn to do everything from drive cars to play video games. ACC was not the first to predict machine intelligence. MIT professor and Bell Labs fellow Claude Shannon was one of many who said that someday machines would be able to beat the human grandmaster at chess and write poetry. The chess thing has happened already, not so sure about the poetry. In the age of Sophia and so many different kinds of Al and virtual influencers and personalities, like OK Google, it seems like an intelligent computer like HAL from 2001 that can converse with us is not that far off. Give it 10 to 20 years, say some experts. Number 6, liquid water and life. In the sequel to 2001 called 2010, Odyssey 2 and its follow-up 2061 Odyssey 3, Clarke scrapped Saturn's moon Iapetus and made the book sequels to the movie rather than to his novel. In the sequel, a crew of Soviet and American astronauts went to Jupiter to find the Discovery and find out what happened to Dave Bowman and his crew who had disappeared. When they got there, one of the moons of Jupiter that is most interesting to them and to the alien star child and Dave Bowman has now become as Europa, which is found to be covered with ice with oceans underneath. The second book ends with a whopper. Jupiter is transformed into a small star and Europa is the reason why, because there is life that can develop here. Now, a now famous line from the end of 2010, all these worlds are yours except Europa, attempt no landing there. In 2061, a crew actually goes to Europa, which has developed into a habitable planet thanks to Jupiter's transformation at the end of 2010 into a small sun, called Lucifer from Earth. Leaving aside the super-intelligent aliens who were responsible for this, Clarke's predictions about Europa being the most likely place for life in the solar system because of the presence of liquid water under the ice covering the planet has turned out fairly accurately. Probes to the Jovian moons have shown that Europa has plumes of water that shoot up from the surface, and it's estimated that it's covered of water 100 kilometers thick. Some estimates say that Europa may have more water than the Earth. Now, what might lie in wait in all that water under the ice? To quote the History Channel's hit series, could it be aliens? Number 7, landing on a comet. Well, we've already done that. Now, at the beginning of the novel 2061, Odyssey 3, published in 1987, in what I thought was a cool sequel, the spaceship Galaxy is landing on the surface of Halley's Comet, which has returned to Earth. In Do the Math, you'll see why the novel was set in 2061. Of course, there's a lot more going on in this novel than the comet, but at the time, this part, along with the rest of the novel, was thought of as science fiction. Today, we know it's not so far-fetched. In 2004, the European Space Agency launched Rosetta, a space probe that was meant to study a comet. And 12 years later, in 2016, the probe not only surveyed the comet 7P Churyumov-Gerasimenko, but it managed to hard land on the comet. That's the Rosetta mission. So we wonder what will be going on in 2061. So okay, there you have the 7 predictions that have either already come true or are very likely to in a decade or not, or two. Not a bad track record, but of course, science fiction being science fiction, there are still lots of things that ACC's novels and papers for us to aspire to. And those are just the ones that have or are likely to come true pretty soon. Wait until we talk about the space elevator, fountains of paradise, diamonds in the heart of gas giants, 2061 Odyssey 3, and interstellar colonization, songs of distant Earth, not to mention the tantalizing idea of artifacts hidden on the moon if you were an ancient alien visitor to the Earth. Where would you put a communications device? On the moon, of course. This is on Zero Hedge. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.